Mr. Speaker, the co-hosts of the podcast.
Mr. Speaker,
Madam Vice President,
members of Congress,
listeners of the podcast.
in the first 2 seasons of the Dead Presidents podcast, we have fully chronicled the lives of our first 25 presidents.
Including not one, but 2 Grover Clevelands, who it actually turns out were the same guy.
We have completed 25 top 5 countdowns, culminating in our top 5 tragic presidential child deaths, which was named Saddest Podcast at the 49th Annual Teardrop Awards.
I'll miss you, Abraham Lincoln's son.
We've also completed 20 presidential war games.
And narrowly survived repeated assassination attempts at the hands of the Clintons.
Finally, we produced 9 Presidential Wrestling Federation pay-per-view events.
We made wrestling great again.
Ladies and gentlemen, our fellow Americans, the state of the podcast is strong.
Thank you. We're happy to appear once again before a joint session of Congress to officially announce the 3rd season of the Dead Presidents podcast, which will be launched on President's Day, February 20th, 2023.
This is an exciting time for the podcast. The Dead Presidents podcast, of course, is the only presidential podcast that is actually 4 presidential podcasts.
That's right.
First, we have our flagship chronicles of the lives of the presidents.
The Dead Presidents podcast is where dead presidents come alive.
We ended Season 2 on a cliffhanger with the assassination of William McKinley, and we will begin Season 3 with the epic life story of Theodore Roosevelt, who upon McKinley's death stepped in to become the youngest president in our nation's history. From there, we will continue on through the 20th century.
The American century.
And we'll guide the podcast through 2 world wars and into the Cold War era.
Not only that, many new and exciting top 5s, beginning with the top 5 Monroe Doctrine invocations to honor the fact that 2023 marks the 200th anniversary of the Monroe Doctrine.
And we'll be continuing with presidential war. We'll be introducing new categories, possibly new ways of playing the game. We might have some new guests, perhaps bring back some returning guests. And if you play your cards right...
And you're a bad man.
It could even be you, guesting on a game of presidential war.
That's just it. And also, the PWF, the Presidential Wrestling Federation, returns, albeit in something of a precarious position. Its rivalries with Confederate Championship Wrestling and the Trump Wrestling Organization may not be over, and there could be other challengers from about the globe. One thing's for sure, we are going to keep wrestling great.
That's right, all this and more is coming in the 3rd season of the Dead Presidents podcast. Mark your calendars for President's Day, February 20th, 2023.